Yes.
Yeah, we're recording. Please go ahead, Kathy.
Good morning, everyone. Today is the Thursday, November 20th meeting of the Finance Committee. And I want to apologize for everyone that I didn't get the meeting agenda posted last week in time for the Tuesday meeting. But thank you all for the flexibility of switching it to today. The first thing I need to do, as always, is make sure that everyone can hear and be heard because we're conducting this meeting by Zoom. I will just go around the room as I see faces on my screen. Andy?
Present.
Joe?
Present.
Mandy?
Present.
Bob?
Present.
Tom?
Present.
We are all here, and except for Alicia Walker, who I believe can join us today. So I will announce her when I see her. We have a pretty simple agenda today. The first item is public comments, and then we're going to see how far we can get with a revision of guidelines. I will first open it for public comments. And Athena, you're going to have to manage this for me, I think. Let me see if I can see.
It could be easy because there's no one in the attendees list at the moment.
Do we have any members of the public right now? No.
There's no attendees at this point.
Okay, I can see it on my screen. So since we have no public attendees now, if some appear at the end of our discussion, I will open it up for public comments. So I've asked Mandy to be a scribe today. I sent everyone the Word document. And so what I think, if no one objects, I think would be the easiest thing is just to go through the document with a focus on the yellow shaded. Some of the other track edit changes are merely to change the year to FY27 and the dates. And I tried, but I will double check to make sure any time I do a percent or a number that I link it to the document that Sean has provided us on the projections for FY27. So I tried to just update all the numbers. The rest, as we go through this, are things we started to discuss on the committee as we've had our preliminary discussions, and several items that came up in either the budget coordinating group meeting and or the council meeting on Monday night that were inserted that could be part of the guidelines. So with that, Mandy has volunteered to show the document. And Andy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, as I went through it and I found typographical errors and things like that, I noted them. Do you want them pointed out as we go through, or how do you want to handle that?
Sure. Mandy, what I've watched her do this before, she's pretty quick on those corrections, Andy. So I'm sure when I do things quickly, I always have typos. I miss letters or mistype. That would be great. And that after this meeting, we'll see how far we get. We can resend a draft to have people do those kinds of edits. So I don't think we have to have perfect wording this time, but if anyone's picked those up, that would be great. So with that, if I see no objections, I think we will start with Mandy showing the document on her screen.
I think you should be able to see it.
No.
And it's big enough, or do you guys need it bigger?
Looks good.
I can see it, so I'll.
For me.
Okay. Well, let me see. I've never tried to do this on an iPad before on being able to see people's hands. So when you raise your hands, I think you will appear or a speaker.
And I can't, with sharing a screen, I don't have a raise hand function. So I'll just wave at the camera if I want to talk. Okay, Kathy?
Okay. So I'll talk people through this a little bit. I added that one sentence other than changing the dates. We note that next year's revenue is particularly risky to uncertainty about state revenues. We had discussed this with Sean, that we're assuming the state aid remains on that. I thought that short statement would just be an alert that that item might be subject. We always don't know what it is at this time. So if there are no objections to these, I think Mandy could go ahead and accept the edits as written. And then the next paragraph is, again, those changes are to change from FY26 to FY27. And I put the number in as well as the percentage because I think it's important that the public and all of us realize that we're working with, on our budget base, a very small projected increase. So this year, unlike last year, I put the dollar amount in as well as the percentage. And again, if anyone, is everyone's okay with these changes, we'll just accept them as we go along. I'm not seeing any hands up, so I think that's a yes. So this is the first insert on fire and EMS. We heard loud and strong on Monday night at the council meeting, but we've also in the past addressed this. So this has in the guidelines include a multi-year plan to increase. And I'll just stop there. It's a general statement. And since our budget is very tight, at any place we insert something on increasing staffing, we're going to have to figure out how to accommodate it within the overall budget. So I'll stop on that one to see what comments people have on it, because it's a major change. And this could be people don't want it in. It's not precise. It just says
Bob and Andy have their hands up, Kathy.
Okay. Yeah, I can't. Let me see whether I have any way of.
So Bob has his hand up.
Okay, Bob, why don't I have you call on people, because on my iPad screen I literally can't see those.
Okay. All right. Well, the first thing I would recommend is, first of all, I agree with this, but I think we should make it more general, because we've also heard a lot about CRES staffing and possibly even police staffing. Maybe we should make it more general to increase public safety staffing, including, fire, EMS, CRES, and or police as appropriate, or something like that.
I'll take any other comments on it, Bob.
Andy, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think that there has been a long history of concern about the fire EMS staffing. This is not a new issue, and I don't know how to point that out other than that this is your last opportunity to get my living history with all of this stuff, because Paul might recall that in 2017 there was I think the most recent of a comprehensive study by an outside consultant about the need for staffing for that particular department. And I sort of at this point feel like we ought to be recognizing that this has been an historic issue, not a new issue.
Paul, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, so what I would recommend is that instead of say you assume there should be an increase, I think what you really need to do is evaluate staffing for a fire EMS, because I think you don't really have evidence other than sort of testimony at a public forum that the people asking for additional staffing. So I think, and I think an evaluation of staffing with a plan to move forward if additional staffing is required would be that's the outcome I would be seeking. Like, what is our staffing levels? How does it compare to other people, to other organizations and different towns? And then if we were to increase staffing, how would you fund that?
So the suggested language is evaluate staffing of fire EMS with a plan to move forward depending on results.
develop a plan to provide funding or something like that. Yeah, because I think I think both, what the fire chief has said in our conversations early Monday was that we need a multi-year plan. It's not one thing, but we need a multi-year plan. There's lots of different things that need to be reviewed. It's not just increasing fire staffing. I think you want to look at the entire fire operations for this.
So Mandy has slightly amended what you said, include in the budget a first year or a multi-year plan.
So we may not have money to, I don't know if we have money to do it. Adding anything this year is going to be a challenge. So, but Mandy does have her hand up, Kathy.
Yeah, okay. I'm really apologizing because I cannot
I know.
see the hands. And I can't figure out how to change that.
Well, and I can't physically raise my hand with
Yeah,
a raise hand
yeah.
button, so
Okay.
I just have to like wave. So I'm used to being missed because of this.
Okay.
Paul, I don't want to interrupt you. Were you done?
Yeah, I am. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of comments. I think given the history of fire EMS, as Andy just cited, with plenty of reports that go back years, I would argue it's appropriate to focus on that over public safety staffing in general.
I agree.
So I think, as Andy said, we have the history. So I wouldn't necessarily support generalizing the statement to public safety staffing in general. I think there's other issues we have with staffing regarding CRES versus police, or not versus, because that sounds bad. But the interaction between CRES and police, and as that program goes forward, that we might be able to address a little bit more. We're supposed to get an evaluation per the goals coming soon of the CRES program. We might be able to address some of that within the town manager's policy goals. Versus the budget here, because I think there's some decisions that need made there that are not as historically have the historic support that fire EMS staffing levels do. And for that reason, I worry about language that Paul suggested of evaluate the staffing levels. How many times do we need to evaluate it before we try to follow through with what's there? I haven't read the 2017 memo and evaluation that Andy referred to recently, but I'm pretty sure it called for a severe increase in staffing levels based on the call volume at that time, if my memory is serving me correctly. And so I hesitate to say evaluate it again. I know there's probably not a lot of money in the budget right now for this, so I want to just preview another section that I think is down below, a couple of pages below, that I think is really important for us to put in this memo and to talk about as a council, which is asking the manager to early on, I think I put a March 1 deadline in, come to us and say, given the budget that you have, what do you have to cut? What can't you add? Can you not fulfill this, say, fire EMS staffing? And how much would it cost? In preview of, and I know people don't like it, but in preview of having a discussion about whether we should ask for a 2.5 override. And I know many of us are not confident that if we asked for one, it would pass. I will say I don't think it would, but I think we need to have concrete numbers. And so I think we need to have concrete numbers in a multi-year plan of how we would add fire EMS and whether that would require a 2.5 override, or what other services would need decreased to do so. So I see this statement of a multi-year plan to increase fire EMS going hand in hand with getting concrete information early on before a budget is proposed about, in all 4 functional areas, what this budget can support and can't support, and how much it would cost to support the levels of services that the people in town are asking us to support. So I would support the first of these 2 bullet points, not the second.
Um, Kathy, just so you know,
Yeah.
Alicia's here. You need to confirm that she can hear and be heard, and she and I both have our hands up.
Okay, actually, because I don't see her on my screen. Alicia, can you hear and hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, so I think because Mandy stopped sharing the screen, I can now see you all with hands up. So Andy, your hand is up. I can see you. Um,
Well,
yeah.
I didn't know if you wanted to take Alicia first, but I would agree with that it should focus on fire EMS. I can't remember if we have a more detailed explanation of it below because we're not looking at the entire document right now. But we should have probably be saying a little bit more further in the document. And I think we don't have to own the result of the 2017 study that was done by the Carlson Group, which is a consulting firm that looked at it. I will send either the document or the link to the committee later. It is on the town website too, which is how I got it this morning. Uh, but I think that there is a long history, and there was a substantial um, presentation made at the last council meeting. So I would agree with that recommendation from Mandy.
So Alicia, I am somehow not seeing you, but
Okay.
let me see
Yeah,
whether.
she has her hand up, Kathy.
Okay,
It
Alicia.
may be because my camera's not on, and sometimes there's a Zoom setting, like on your personal Zoom, that would make it so that you can't see folks who don't have their camera on.
Okay.
But yes, I have my hand up. Thank you. Um, so I joined a little bit late, so I missed the beginning of this conversation. But I did just want to share. So I don't know if anything that I have to say has already been said, but I'm feeling very strongly about this situation, just considering what we have just experienced as a town, what we have continuously been experiencing in terms of relying on mutual aid to address sort of occurrences in the town. And I am not very familiar with the 2017 study, but if we have known for this a long period of time or historically that we have needed to increase staffing for our firefighters, I just feel like we should have already had a plan for this. So I absolutely agree with keeping the bullet specifying that we include a plan for a multi-year plan for increasing staffing at the for firefighter and EMS. And I do not wish to have another evaluation unless I guess maybe we want to know the final number that we're heading for. But if it's just to gradually increase over the years, I think we need to get that off the ground now. I would be in favor it, to looking to how we could even unfreeze the one frozen position for this coming fiscal year. Because I think something that came up in public comment that really stood out to me was our sort of increase in student population. Like UMass is continuously adding students to uh, admitting students to the university. I know we've had increases for the last couple of years in numbers there. We are looking at densifying areas of our town and building more apartment buildings and building more affordable housing. Like we are going to have more and more opportunities for things like what happened at Olympia Place to continue to happen in this town. And if we cannot address those things and we do not have capacity now, that is very dangerous. And it feels very irresponsible for us as a town to not start to work on that right now, considering what has just happened in our town. I think we need to look at the percentage for capital. I think we need to look at the fact that we've been using conservative budgetary practices and we have surpluses every single year, and we need to figure out how to give fire and EMS at least one additional firefighting position in this fiscal year. And then maybe we move forward with a plan, like a more long-term multi-year plan. But I think this is a very serious issue. It's public safety. Firefighters stated very clearly, like, we could have lost lives I don't think we want to continue to jeopardize the lives of the people in our town. I think we need to be a little bit more aggressive with UMass in the future in terms of getting more funding from them for fire and other services that they rely on for the town. But I think like what we can look at right this exact minute is what other small tweaks can we make in the upcoming fiscal year so that we can fund at least one more firefighter position. And I would strongly encourage that we do that.
Sean, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly highlight some of the things we have done since that 2017 report. So one thing that happened since then was back then we had Hadley. Some of you may or may not recall that, but we serviced Hadley. Hadley decided to go their own direction. And at that time, we didn't make any adjustments to the staffing at the fire. We left the staffing alone. So in effect, it was this, the impact of that was, lower call volume at that point and the same amount of staffing. And then with ARPA, we did add the 4 firefighters, which was about a 10% increase in staffing. So I don't disagree that we need a plan and we need to address the feedback that we heard. But I do think it's, looking at that report that Andy cited, looking at what has happened since that report, and then deciding how to move forward is a good idea.
Paul, did you want to comment?
Yeah, yes, just build on that. So I think it really is important to read the report because the report really talked about when we needed staffing, not just around the clock staffing. It looked at peak use times and is there a way to adjust the union contract to provide for day shifts. So that's been part of the plan. So we hire people when we need. I think, we even this morning we've had conversations about how to move forward with additional staffing for fire. So I think we're understanding that. But I also think we have to look at all the services that the fire department provides, where we're allocating our firefighter paramedics. Are we spending our money wisely in a certain way? But we are spending our money wisely, but just are we able to get the most out of our current budget? And then how much additional funds do we need to be able to staff additionally? And I think the fire chief has thought this through, and we've had really positive conversations, and we will continue to have those. Because I think what I'm hearing from the council, which I totally appreciate and agree with, is that you want to plan with funding sources to increase our ability to respond to calls, because it's changed since 2017. We have a lot more ambulance calls. Even though we've lost Hadley, it's a different profile of the community going on right now. So I think we as staff are really driven to get a proposal prepared for the council during this budget process.
Thank you.
So I'll raise my hand too. Paul, are all the vacancies Alicia talked about Prezy 1, but we had several vacancies in fire. Had they all been filled?
So there's one position that can be filled that they're interviewing for. It sort of got set back because of the fire. And then we will have all the available positions filled. So they've been very good at working through hiring new people and pretty excited about the people that we have hired. There is the frozen position. There are a couple positions where there are long-term injuries where they're positions that they're not utilized in our staffing model, but we're still paying the people.
So if we changed from the poll change from the change we had to, instead of evaluate, what about devise a plan for adequately staffing fire EMS?
Yeah, or improve staffing. I think I get what people are saying. We don't want to do any more evaluations. I think that's a smart thing to take out. But to improve staffing or response times or something, I'm not sure exactly what the words.
So devise a plan to improve staffing for fire EMS?
Yeah.
And if others can see the screen, that's great, because I can't. I'm happy.
And so if I'm hearing the finance committee right, it's like this is your number one priority in terms of budget. I think that would be important for you to tell us if that's what your number one priority is, or if you're going to have a whole bunch of different priorities. It'd be helpful to know how we should prioritize the funds coming coming forward. And I think you would also, part of this is not just use are there other funding sources that we can draw on, which I think Councilor Walker mentioned. Can we go to the university? Are there other grants out there that we can secure to not make it all land on the taxpayer?
Yeah, I would agree with that. So go ahead, Mandy. You're muted.
Alicia was first, so Alicia should go, but I'm going to say one thing, that university renegotiation is later in the document, so we'll get there on comments on that.
Yeah.
Alicia.
Okay, I was gonna suggest language for the bullet point, but I think you got it because I just wanted to make sure that the improving the staffing plan for fire and EMS also included the funding sources to do so. But I think you added that. So yes, I think that, Paul, what you said was exactly what I was at least trying to say. And I still would hope that when I mean, I don't know if the finance committee will make this decision ultimately, but I would hope that we would look at trying to start that immediately. Like, is there anything we can do in this fiscal year to start that process? Because I do also want to say, while data, evaluations, reports, all of those things are really great and can help inform our decisions, what's actually really important is what is happening on the ground. What is the experience of the actual firefighters? And they were really, really clear that they don't have safe staffing levels. And I think they would know better than any consultant, better than any person that could come and evaluate for us, the department, that they're saying they're sending trucks out with 1 or 2 staff. Like, that is not safe. That is not okay. It's not okay that if there was another call to come in when they were dealing with Olympia Place, that wouldn't have been, there would have been no staff for that. So I don't think, I think it's very clear that what is happening on the ground is not acceptable. And so I hope that we can take this very seriously.
And if I could just, we do, just to confirm that we, town staff, the fire chief, Sean and I have already had, we're engaged in this conversation.
I just had one more thing just to add on this. We in the past, not necessarily in guidelines, but we've talked about regional approaches. So I think other small towns, not Amherst, but others, everyone is relying on mutual aid when there's a crisis level. So we give it as well. So I think the devise a plan and financing is important wording to be thinking of what's going on. And I think part of it, Paul, you're saying, are there places where we can save staff time and reallocate it as you look through it, everything fire EMS does, which I think devise a plan encompasses all of that. So I see both Andy and Bob have their hands up.
Andy was first.
That is, do I have your permission to send the 2017 study by email to the entire group?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And that was, I also think that was, we talked about this way back when, because we thought we needed to look at it again with Hadley moving out of us, and we never looked at it again. I mean, we as a council never looked at it again. We asked that we would be looking at it again. So yes, Andy, we should be all looking at that. Bob?
Yeah, I wanted to point out 2 things. One is that Hadley has just gutted their fire department.
Right.
So I don't know what's going to happen with them. But secondly, I wanted to point out, not to have people forget that when our fire EMS staff are all out on calls, it puts the rest of the town's residents at risk, even those who are not being served right away. In other words, if I had I'm 73 years old. If I had a heart attack on a Friday night, I don't know if I would, if they'd get there in time. So it's not just the fire risk, which I agree.
Yeah.
It's the risk to the town that we don't have sufficient coverage. And that results in, even if we get mutual aid, it results in delays. And that can be, in a health emergency, that can mean the difference between life and death.
And I also agree with that, Bob. I'm not sure when UMass did this, but their health center used to have beds, overnight beds for students that avoided ambulance and they shut down that facility. So when Paul, in the discussions with them, those beds still exist. They're just not used. They used to take students and basically detox and have them do what we're now doing when we bring them over to Cooley Dickinson when they're, and they don't do that anymore. They still have the physical capacity to do it, but they no longer have done it. So UMass took that off the line in a way that affects particularly weekend ambulance responses. Bob, the advice to some seniors has been don't have an emergency on the weekend.
Exactly. And I will say my wife had an emergency. She got to the hospital okay, but the hospital was understaffed, and she sat for 4 hours without any kind of treatment.
And that was the issue, that it's also queuing up inside the emergency room.
Yeah.
Mandy.
Being mindful of time, can I accept these and move on?
Yeah.
Yes.
We spent a lot of time on.
Okay, so if you do share screen, I'm going to have to take, I think IT is going to have to look at my computer because it won't let me restart it either. So I am going to struggle on with iPad, and Mandy, you're going to have to show it again on the screen for me, or maybe I can just, because I'm not seeing it anymore. But
that's weird. Everyone else is seeing it, right?
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, so just keep going, and I can imagine it.
It might be a setting on your iPad where you see the speakers over the shared screen.
Okay, let's see.
Sometimes it's a swipe to the left to get a different view.
Okay, I got it back. Thank you. It was in the attempt to see the hands are up. So Bob, I'm relying on you to watch for hands.
Sure, I'll watch for hands.
So the second one is basically the same as last year, was equal changes. Just now, last year at this time, in the fall was 3%.
Can we accept the revenue projection change?
Okay, yeah. Sorry. Thanks, Mandy.
Okay.
So the second one is I've left it as equal. This wording is exactly the same as last year, just with an update to 3.5, because at this time last year we were at 3%. And just as we're looking at it, there was a question, should we maintaining the contribution of OPED at 600, just so people understand this. This is a reduction of 50,000 in Sean's projection. They have it has it going up to 650. So we also have the option of saying decrease it. So right now I left the wording as it was last year.
Yeah, I agree that that we should keep it at 600,000 unless Paul or Sean, this is going to cause, heartburn for our rating, our bond rating.
Are there any other hands on either
Mandy
of
Joe's
these two items, the equal and or the post OPEB? You call them, Bob.
Mandy has her hand up.
I agree for those two bullet points. I agree with Bob and what's written at this point. I think we need to later on put some wording in regarding the equal percentage increases because if we're adding staffing, there's all sorts of questions there. But for in here at this time with the information we have after BCG of everyone's facing the same hardships, I'm willing to leave this one at equal percentages for now.
Hey, Sean, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I think keeping the contribution of 600 is fine, with the caveat that one thing I am hearing from our auditors is that they would like the finance committee or the council at some point to not like firmly commit itself, but to vote some sort of plan or policy around funding of OPEB. In particular, that when retirement pension assessment, when the retirement system is fully funded and our pension assessment starts to go down, that there is at least the intent to shift some of that funding towards OPEB. That's sort of the big piece of our funding plan. And that has We've discussed that before, but the committee has never sort of adopted or voted that they agree with that plan. So I think at some point in the spring, that would be a critical step. And if we don't do that, then the discount rate that our actuary uses and when our auditors evaluate that, that might go up and it will increase that liability for us. So that's separate from this, but I think keeping this at 600 would be okay. And if we could work on that other piece, that would sort of offset that impact.
Any other comments on these two?
Paul,
Anderson.
Yeah, just a quick note. So I think I agree with Sean on that, but I just caution, I think if we start to reduce that number, that's a bad sign to the rating
Yeah.
agency. So I think level funding is okay, and that yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to see it reduced either.
Okay, so that I think we're accepting both of those changes, Mandy, those two bullets. And I suggest we come back to the elementary school budget. We've got a text on this. The issue on the elementary school budget base, I think everyone knows, or hope everyone knows, is in the projection that Sean has, as per the council and the finance committee's guidelines, the one-time funding is not part of the base. So the 3.5% is applied not to the current operating budget, but to the operating budget minus that extra money. And that was the intent of that, or the expectation was that the sixth grade, the consolidation of going from 3 schools to 2 schools would save money, and that the elementary school just needed bridge money to get to that point. Now there's some question on that, depending on what the decision is on with the 6th grade, that the 6th grade may absorb some of that or most of that savings. So this was just, I left this in drafting, I just left this blank because it wasn't clear what we should say here. So Bob, whatever hands are up on this, we should talk about this here.
Okay, I see Alicia.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I just wanted to add, though, that I think regardless of when the transition for the 6th grade happens, like, I don't think we should change the way we're approaching the financing, but too proactively. Like, even if the change were to happen this year, I don't think that that means we see immediate savings. I think we need to keep that money there while the transition is happening, because there will probably be unforeseen costs or things. It's a big transition. It's unprecedented, at least in this town. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know what it's really going to cost us. So I would be opposed to changing anything just yet.
Um,
Bob, may I?
Mandy, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. It that line in this section I think is extraneous, because we had something similar to below that is sort of slightly highlighted. I don't think we need it in both. I think we do have to discuss it. But in terms of the projections, what we did last year was, if there are surpluses, do the base first. And I think we need to discuss that because of some of what Alicia said. I think we also cannot forget that, and let people know and remind people that I believe our capital plan for FY26 has capital money for a transition, for some of those expenses, at least that would be on the capital side. And I understand, Alicia, that you might be talking about more operational expenses that might sort of be one time as things happen, but we can't forget that there are some transition expenses. So I would be in favor of deleting it from the highlighted area, keeping sort of a comment down here. In the prioritize increasing, it was the regional last year, but keeping a comment in there that says revisit. That sentence for elementary school. And then I just want to highlight this one. I am in favor of this last bullet point before the revised projections one about increasing expense lines to reflect current expenses. I think slowly running into or devolving into concerning budgeting practices where our budget doesn't actually reflect known expenses well, that it under budgets what we know we're going to spend in certain areas, and that concerns me. So I would support this other yellow bullet about increasing expense lines.
And just for those who weren't part of the budget review in May, one of the things we realized was that the operating expense budget for example, for DPW had in essence been frozen dollar-wise. And each year as a result, it's spending more than that operating expense budget, but relying on vacancies to fund it. So it doesn't come in over budget. So this line would ask for more accurate forecasting of the expense line, to at least what we're spending now. I'm just explaining what that yellow line means. So I think the recommendation here is to remove the standalone bullet on elementary school budget base, just take it out, and then keep the second yellow one. If people can indicate whether they're okay with both of those changes.
I agree.
Okay, Mandy, so we're removing elementary school base, just take it out as a
Alicia
little,
has her hand up.
okay. We're going to come back to elementary, Alicia, so it didn't disappear.
Okay.
But
That's what I was going to ask. I'm not opposed to taking out either of those bullet points. I just wanted to know what that would mean about our recommendation for the base for the elementary school.
So in the next one is where Mandy's got prioritized increasing the Amherst elementary school budget to its full blah, blah, blah. That the first amount of money would and now it should be prior to the 3.5%. Mandy, yeah. So that is so it's basically that little line, 269,000 is, I think, my memory of it, is that on the base or not? So this second one would be if there's money, if the revenue projection goes up, we'll keep that money in, rather than, that would be the first place the revenue projection goes up, that's where the money would go. That's how we worded it last year for the regional school.
I'll call on myself.
Yeah.
One of the thing that we have later on in the draft is a sort of a stabilization fund for special education. I wonder if we should make that a more general stabilization fund for unforeseen expenses. That could include transition to transition to the sixth grade. It could include special education. I mean, they gave the example we heard was one family moved to town after the schools opened with 3 kids who had special education needs, and that was not really sort of planned for. I think if we have revenue, if we have free cash, one place to put it would be to put it into some sort of a stabilization fund for education. And I'm thinking for the elementary schools, so that they have some buffer there that, I mean, the danger is they're going to use it all up every year, which of course that's not the intent. But I think if we somehow label it for emergencies or for unforeseen expenses, that maybe we can that's one way to deal with this issue about the budget. Because if we leave it in the base of the budget, it's there forever. It'll never come out again. Whereas a stabilization fund is really more of a buffer fund. It's more buffer funding.
So Bob, just so I want you to call on the other hands, but I want to understand. So you're saying rather than prioritize putting it on the base, you'd rather create this emergency stabilization fund. Are you proposing that as an alternative?
Yes, I am. Just because we could use it as a buffer for the transition, or they could use it as a buffer for special education needs, or for any unforeseen. I just think of, if they're building a budget and then all of a sudden after the school's open, they have an unforeseen need, then it seems to me that they should be able, that this would be able to be tapped for that. That's my thoughts. Anyway, there's Sean and Andy and Alicia have their hands up. Sean?
Yeah, so Bob, I don't think you were at BCG, but so the schools do have a special ed stabilization fund. I created it back when I was there in early 2016, 17, 18, sometime around then. It has never been used. There is $242,000 in it. And it's been increased a little bit over time. Looks like they put some more money into it in FY21. It was initially seeded with some money back in, looks like 2018. So there is a fund already with $242,000 in it. I wouldn't recommend putting more money into it until that was used first.
Okay.
And again, it has never been accessed since it's been created. So they have that buffer and that contingency there. And it's a little bit unique in how it's used. It was a new fund that the state allowed. It was like a special legislation that was passed to allow the creation of it. So I believe in order for the schools to use it, they do have to come to the council and get approval, which is good. That's the way you'll know that it's being used and that's what it's intended for. But it's specifically for unanticipated special education expenses. That was the specific intent behind it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Andy?
Yeah, I think that Sean may have covered most of the intent of what I have to say, but it's simply that Northampton, I know, has a fund, and they have been using it, and it has been very effective because it's special education expenses very quickly year for year, and if in extraordinary years, they have found it to be a really valuable buffer to have. And I know that as you know, I've had many conversations about budget with the council president there.
Hey, thank you, Andy. Alicia?
Thank you, Bob. I was not aware that the school had that fund, so thank you for sharing that, Sean. Although what I was going to say anyhow was that I support that idea, but not as an alternative. I'm not sure if you all are aware of the situation in our elementary schools beyond like what has been shared from the school committee, but our schools are in crisis, like actually currently right now, very, very seriously, in terms of like being able to provide the resources that they need specifically to special education children, but just in general. And so I think it would be a mistake for us to not include the funding in the base right now. Our schools are very much so suffering. I have 3 kids who all have special needs, and their needs have not been able to be met at the school for many reasons, and there are many challenges happening in the elementary schools right now. So I don't think this is the time to take that money out of the base. And I'm glad to hear that they have that stabilization fund for unplanned for expenses. And I'm hoping that we might actually be able to contribute to it because 200, I think you said 242 or something like that, is not a lot of money. And I don't think we want to exhaust it before we contribute to it again. So I would be in favor of figuring out a way to contribute to that on a more regular basis and to keep the base funding for this upcoming fiscal year.
Thank you, Alicia. Kathy?
Yeah, I think, Sean, when I read the legislation, and thank you for providing a link to it, there's a limit to how much can be in the fund. So the way this is worded, we could change the wording. It would be up to the limit. So to the extent we needed to pull down on the money, there would still be money. So I don't know what that limit is. So we're not at the full limit with 242. The legislation allows for this, but it cannot be any more than X% of the base, I think is the way up to the limit allowed by law. So this would allow replenishing it, if we draw down on it, um, it's so if it's 242 right now and up to the limit, I'm not sure what the dollar amount difference is that, and we can come in how that would, but this would put enough money in it and replenish it if you get these sudden surges, and then you don't draw on it unless there's a surge again. So in theory, the budget should anticipate ongoing, not the one time. So I was going to suggest that change, but also we could put a footnote in here, and we don't have to do it now, that lets the world know there is such a fund already and that it has money in it, because this was a discovery. We thought we were going to have to create it, and we discovered that we have it already. So it'd be good, I think, to just put a footnote in, an unusual footnote, but a footnote allowing people to know it exists.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, so just for clarity, if I'm understanding what you've come to so far, is that your expectation is that any additional staffing for fire would come out of the town's 3.5%. And then if there's additional money that's coming in, there are these two bullets, possibly three for free cash, but to prioritize increasing elementary school budget, and then increase town budget, all four budgets overall. And I guess those are in order of priority. Just want to be clear that those are, if that's in order of priority, or if you were going to put in additional funding for fire in this list. So just if you could give me clarity on that, that'd be helpful.
Kathy?
And I see Mandy Jo has her hand up too.
Okay, I can't see Mandy. Sorry.
No, I think that's a good question, Paul. And in the fire EMS, I mean, part of it was a heavy push back to UMass so that it doesn't have to all come out of our budget. So I do think we need clarity here. And I'll just speak to the capital budget, where I've been the only person so far who has wanted to reduce the amount coming out of the operating budget to capital. But that's one of the ways I thought that, yes, we could increase both the school budget, the elementary schools budget, and the town budget to allow for the fund.
Yeah, I guess my question is, it doesn't matter where the money comes from. It's just, what are your priorities is my question.
No, so I understand what you're asking, that where if we find new money, revenues are higher than we thought, where do we put it? And so in this list, are we putting it, so the other would be distributed proportionately, but I think what Paul is asking is, do we put a bullet before that says distribute it secondly to the town budget to allow for the fire EMS? That's, I think, what you're suggesting, Paul. Is it up there in the priority list? Yeah.
My question is it subject to funding for additional funds, or is it something you're saying reallocate funding that within the town's budget to make this happen?
I'm taking my hand down. Let everyone else respond to that. I think it's a good question.
Mandy, I can't see you, but I understand your hand is up.
Yes, a couple of things. I'd like to hear from Sean why he wouldn't suggest appropriating, the way this bullet is regarding the Special Ed Stabilization Fund is appropriate from free cash to the Special Ed Stabilization Fund, so not out of that. And why wouldn't you suggest doing that, in that when I read the state law, there were a couple of questions I had regarding the state law, right? The balance can't exceed 2% of net school spending. So is that required net school spending or our actual operating budget? Those are totally different numbers, right? Required net school spending is 17.5 million. Operating budget is about 29. So that's a total balance of 350 to 580, if I did my math right. If the current balance is 250, that's an extra $100,000 from what at this year we're expecting to be a $10 million free cash. Well, a $10 million surplus, and I know 3.8 of that is already going to replenish free cash. So it's not in there. And it appeared, the bigger thing is it appeared that the funding of that Special Ed Stabilization Fund needed to be in the school budget, in their school budget, that it's not something that can be done, say, in our November free cash transfers, that it has to be in a yearly budget. And so if that's the case, why wouldn't we say, put it in the budget, instruct the school or Paul to try and put it in that budget so that it's there, using free cash. I'm not trying to take it out of other things because that's a way we can use that, plan for the November free cash transfers. This is one of those planning tools. You know, do they have to happen in the budget? Could we do it in November is one question, right? Another one is the region also has one. What do we do about the region? I don't know. Does it have to be in the budget? And then I guess the next question is, it sounds like the spending of the stabilization fund can happen at any time during the year. So I'd like clarification if that's correct. So that if that emergency comes up in August, we just get the request from the school committee in a financial order. Or I don't even know, would it be a financial order to approve spending from the special education stabilization fund. So those are the questions I had about that. Why wouldn't we appropriate free cash for it if it's not at its maximum? So that it's there if there is a thing. And then in terms of Paul's question, he's got a great question. I think I would put fire over elementary school at this point, simply because we don't have enough information about the what has always been assumed to be a savings when the two schools open, when the one new school opens and consolidates the two schools, such that that's why that wasn't included in the base. And until we have more information as to what that budget looks like, that sort of reformulated quote level services budget, I would prefer to prioritize our any surpluses. Right now, it's a $500,000 deficit, to fire EMS over increasing the elementary school base to a level that we assumed would not be, in terms of that amount that is there that we said was one time, is equivalent to almost the anticipated savings on utility costs in the new elementary school. And I understand there's other concerns there with the elementary school budget. But I think we need to deal with those and have a better conversation of who gets more money from their typical base. And that's something that I tried to deal with later on in the document with the conversation and reports by March 1. But I think I'd put the EMS above the elementary school at this point and keep the free cash for the elementary school sped fund.
Are there other reactions to this? So this is
Okay.
put
I
above.
see Alicia and Sean have their hand up. Alicia?
I don't want to say I disagree, but I just like, for me, these things are not mutually exclusive. They are all priorities. It's not a 1, 2, 3. I think both things need to happen. And so to the best of your ability, Paul, and if other finance committee members agree with me, I would hope that you would see a way to make both of these things happen. And I am now thinking a little bit more about Kathy's suggestion of going a little bit lower on our capital contribution to make that happen. I think both of these things feel very critical right now. I also think that, again, I don't know when exactly we'll see savings. I think the school is due to open in the fall, but we'll still also have operating expenses for Wildwood. I think, Paul, you mentioned that. And so I think it's too soon to be rearranging our budget for those anticipated savings. I think that we should look at that in the next fiscal year. I think right now it would be really important to make both of these things happen.
Thank you, Alicia. Sean?
Thank you. Responding to what Mandy Jo had asked. So why I wouldn't put more money necessarily into the Special Education Stabilization Fund. One, again, has not been used in 7 years. And two, if there was ever an emergency we could still the council could still appropriate from free cash to the schools middle of the year if there was a unexpected placement, even if it surpassed everything that was in the special ed stabilization fund. The council could do an emergency appropriation from either general stabilization or from free cash. So by moving it, it's just kind of reducing the flexibility, I guess, that the council has with its reserves. It's not necessarily, again, this money is really supposed to be for things that are not anticipated. It's not meant to be an alternative to budgeting for known placements. It's supposed to be if a student moves in, has high needs that weren't budgeted for, or you have a out of district placement that you didn't budget for because you didn't know about it. That's what these funds are supposed to be used for. And between it not being used and that we could still address that emergency with free cash or general stabilization, that's why I felt that way. And then to your question, how it can be used. So it requires a majority vote of the school committee, and then it comes to the city council and it requires a majority vote of the city council to use it. So similar threshold for the council of using free cash would be a majority vote.
Kathy?
Hey, I have a suggestion, kind of comment on all that we're looking at. One is I do think we have to make choices, Elisha. We have to live within a budget, so we don't like our choices is one overall comment I would make. But if we keep the first bullet as a priority, and if we reword the elementary school budget pending an analysis by the elementary school committee on the costs of the sixth grade and the budget, because not just doing it automatically, because one of the issues that Bob raised is once we put it on the base, it's on the base. And we want to avoid a situation where we're actually reducing it. And we expect all the school needs to do to recoup the utility is lock the door of Wildwood and turn over the building to the town. And then it's no longer on the school budget, Wildwood. So if the town decides to open the door and turn on the lights and heat the building, it would be town costs. So there's real savings on utility, just requires action. So I don't know, I had the exact wording on the elementary school budget, but I think it should be dependent on an analysis. We haven't seen an analysis. And what I understand from the school committee is they're still looking at a way if they could keep the sixth grade in the two schools and avoid this freestanding sixth grade in the middle school. And as Mandy pointed out, there's $450,000 of capital-like money. And I don't know whether that's fungible or not, but for that move. So I would change the wording on elementary. And then on the third, I would just delete the third, distribute proportionately altogether. I don't think we're going to have enough money to do that. And we might need all of that money for the first two. And then on Sean's thing, instead of appropriate up to the limit, to replenish it, I would just do to replenish it if it gets used up. I would change the wording so if they have to draw down the amount, to replenish it. So right now, it wouldn't necessarily require any new funding, but it would send a signal that we plan on replenishing it. We used free cash this year for the Bangs building. So we do sometimes draw on free cash. So I would change the wording to an existing fund. So I would reword it that way to avoid prejudging whether that money has just been drained. So those would be my suggestions going through all of those for everyone to think about.
Thanks, Kathy. Alicia?
Thanks. I have a question and a comment. My question is it a reasonable expectation that we would have that analysis from the schools before May 1?
They have to.
So do we know when we are expecting to know that?
So Paul and others in BCG, I mean, they have to have a budget by March, correct?
April 1.
April 1.
And in the region, well, yeah, April 1, and they tend to pass it in mid-March. And BCG, I think Shannon stated they might have an initial guess, guess is the wrong word, an initial estimate of the new sort of budget structure and stuff. January, is that what Shannon said? I think. Um, so so not in time, or late December or something. So not in time for our budget guidelines to be passed, but shortly thereafter is what was said in BCG.
Okay. I feel like that is just another one of the just already existing flaws of our budget process. Like getting information after we set the budget guidelines feels a little bit frustrating. And so I don't have a clear sense of this in my head, but I'm wondering if we could adjust the language to reflect that. Because I just don't want us to give a recommendation that then is contradictory to whatever comes out. And then we don't have another chance to discuss it as a finance committee. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to get to?
So, Alicia, if we change the second bullet to say pending analysis of the elementary from the school committee and the district on the elementary school budget, potentially increase.
Yeah, I think that would feel better for me because again, I just don't want to lock us out of the recommendation that we think that needs to happen. And we don't really know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with the sixth grade move. We don't know how long. I know you said it's a simple decision, but we don't know how long that's going to take for Wildwood to be turned back over to the town. And so I think we just need to be prepared to not be locking ourselves into a little bit more of a complicated situation.
Mandy, I see your hand up. I don't know when you put it up relative to others, so go ahead.
Well, thank you. I was wondering about regarding these two, we're down to sort of two if projections indicate surpluses, right? Staffing for the library. I don't know how we want to deal with or discuss the comments that the library made at BCG and has made in the past to Finance Committee that the town's support for the library budget no longer covers the staffing salaries that it used to completely cover. And therefore they've had to essentially cut down staffing levels. And I'm trying to approach this delicately because I recognize the schools are in the same situation, right? The schools have had to decrease some staffing that is not necessarily related to decreased enrollment and all. But how do we address that issue in here as we're talking about revised projections that might have surpluses? That's normally how we try to do with equal percentages. We're all facing awful choices this year, but how do we address or talk about that issue with the library too? And it might not be here, it might be later on in the budget, but I wanted to just bring that up.
Thank you. Paul?
Yeah, so 2 points. One is, I think, in response to Mandy's that point, we're sitting on 5 frozen positions as well, and that's not noted here at all. So I just want to note that. And also, Kathy, you mentioned that the Bank Center renovations are coming from free cash. Really, that's coming from ARPA funds that had to be moved into free cash as a defensive posture. So I don't think you can really say that's really free cash. That's really had I not recommended that we move that into free cash, we would have just spent it out of ARPA. And so I think that's not a good comparison, I think.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Sean?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily looking to add more things to your priorities, but maybe it's somewhere else. I don't see anything about the regional schools. And I, just based on experience, that the regional school budget has had more challenges over the last 10 years, especially with funding and its reliance on state aid and how little that grows year over year. And so this is very specific to supporting the elementary school. Maybe it's somewhere else in this document, but I feel like that should be somewhere, the regional schools as well.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think, there are a lot of nuances to this regional school budget. So one of the new things that will happen is the new track and field, which will bring additional expenses that are not expected, not they're not in the regional school budget. So I think that's something we want to recognize as well.
Yeah. Kathy?
So I amend my taking the third bullet out because that's where the region is, Sean, or that's where the region was. So if there's enough money, here are 3 things we'd like you to do with it. So I wouldn't take the last part out. I did hear one of the towns said if Amherst goes to 3.5 and the regional agreement assessment method continues to be what it is, they will have to do an override. So there is going to be stress on the regional budget, even at 3.5 from the other towns. That's just an observation. That's not that I wouldn't change that.
Mandy?
So
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Kathy.
That's all. I just want to say that, we've got 3 places for the hoped on we get more money than we think we have. 3 places to put it. Yeah. I take my hand down.
Mandy? You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. For the region budget, I think the concern is how do we discuss it? Because as I asked at BCG, our 3.5% guidance may or may not be the defining factor in what the region total assessment is, because it might not be us driving the affordability of the assessment. If our share slice of the pie of the assessment decreases, that 3.5% might increase that we're to our assessment level, that we've put into our guidelines might represent logically a 7, 8, or 9% increase to a town whose slice of the pie goes from 5% to 5.5%, where that's 5 to 5.5 is a 10% increase, right? Right there before a dollar's been added to the assessment. And I don't know how we write that into the guidelines and how we plan for that, frankly, when it might, as Kathy just sort of said, that 3.5 might not be where we are. We might be because of what the other towns can afford at 3 or 2.5. And maybe we need to put into our guidelines something about how do we deal with that if we can do 3.5%, but the other towns can't. What do we do with the excess up to 3.5%? But until we get some information about that, and what we were told was we can't get that estimate until, frankly, like February or March from the region, which is very hard then to talk about in a guideline, but maybe find a way in a next draft of talking about that.
So
I agree that this is a tricky situation. I mean, these are guidelines based on what we know now.
Mm-hmm.
We can kind of revise. We've done that in the past. We've revised the budget by changing the direction to the town manager. I don't know. I don't know how to. I mean, I think we should address it and just say that we don't know what the other towns, 3 towns in the region can afford. We may have to revisit this.
So I have a suggestion. I'm just looking at the time. It's 11:15. Can we? My suggestion would be to leave these as written, and we can put a comment bubble. May need to revisit, and get to some of the others. And then my other is the council has this on their agenda potentially for December 1st to discuss. And it's not clear to me that we are going to have a draft finished but in the next 45 minutes. So what I can do is the council I can tell the council president we won't be ready then, and we have a meeting on December 3rd is when we would complete it. So I just need people to weigh in on that. And I'm not saying we're not going to finish, but we're moving on to the next parts. So just alert people to the two timelines we're up on.
I think if we plug through this, the descriptions will go quicker if we can get through these sections, because this is sort of the big recommendations.
Okay, so then the next one is capital. I had raised the issue of lowering this amount, and I didn't say to what, and 10.5, and it was to free up money for the operating budget. And I thought in terms of two things about this, that if we started moving in, so I can't articulate the way the two interact in numbers, but I could if people wanted to. If we started moving in some of the money that's in the capital reserve to supplement the capital budget, and we had a plan to move in. And I think, Sean, the last I saw was in just when we were looking at the budget, but there was nearly 11 million at that point, and it's been earning since then. So we started moving in some of that money with a schedule. It would begin to pay for, there were line items for DPW for that building as it comes online for construction and or for the study. So it wasn't to decrease the amount we're spending each year on the capital budget, but it was to start to supplement it. So I thought we could go lower on the 10.5 for not just this year, but for a couple of years by pulling down that capital amount that was allocated from capital. We could also it might not be just for DPW, it might be to supplement roads. So it would be the notion it's a capital budget, capital reserve, let's use some of it. So that was my two pieces on why I thought it could go on lower, but I left it in this draft, it still says 10.5. I'm finished. And I see Mandy's hand is up, Bob.
Okay, Mandy.
Thank you. I'm concerned that every year when we see tight operating budgets and, we suggest decreasing the capital budget below what our target is. And I guess the question is our target 10.5 or 10 at this point? At one point it was 10. And then when we looked at all the models, including the models from last year, it was a 10.5 target. And I think we should pick a target and stick to that target without saying, oh, but the operating budgets are tight, so let's decrease capital for that. Because we've seen the result of decreasing capital when operating budgets are tight. That's what happened in 07, 08, 2012, where our capital line was like 5% instead of 10%. And we're seeing the result of that now with the capital demands we have because we didn't fund the ongoing maintenance of capital. We deferred it all in order to support operating budgets, and that deferral has come home to roost. And I worry that it is seen as an easy target to reduce, even 100,000 here or there, that then doesn't, that then we hear, one of the things we most hear from our residents is not just schools and fire and operating, it's capital investments. And so I don't think we should be looking to capital to reduce it. And the models that were presented last year and that the council for nearly the entire time, for the last 5 years, I think that I've been on the council has worked with is 10.5%, not 10. Even though I know some of the guidance before was 10, to do that. In terms of the allocating supplemental capital funds, Model 2 from last November had us starting to do that, I think, in FY27, expecting that DPW was there, and it included a minimum of 3 million in cash capital. I think this budget season, we need to sort of start saying, what is our minimum cash capital? And then maybe we start following that Model 2 that we talked about last year in finance of, if we don't hit that minimum cash capital, given all of the debt, whether that be for DPW or this or that, then we supplement with the capital stabilization. But what is our minimum cash capital? Is it 3? Is it 3.5? Is it 4? Model 2 had 3. 3 might be a little low nowadays. Model 2 was before we saw lots of inflation on capital spending in terms of costs. Should it be 3.5 or 4? And that's what we supplement for. So I don't necessarily like this wording, but I agree with some sort of wording regarding using capital stabilization funds to supplement the capital budget to maintain a certain minimum of cash capital um, payments, because the debt is the debt. And we will deal with that as it comes. But I don't support out reducing that 10.5 to 10 unless we see models that we haven't seen regarding the capital budgets and the projects at a 10% capital allocation, because I think we've been operating at 10.5. And I do think when the fourth bullet that's in yellow, roads and sidewalks, I think we should set a number of what we are, not just an annual target, like allocate, the capital budget, allocate a certain amount of dollars for roads and sidewalks repairs that includes, and then all of those things and capital improvement, and Paul and Sean can figure out how you get to that number. But I think we should set a number. So I would put a number in that fourth bullet point.
Thank you. Alicia?
I do agree with Mandy Jo in terms of setting a target. I think that that would just be helpful for streamlining, especially moving forward in the future. Not that I personally think that that means that we always need to meet that target, but I do think that that would be a helpful step. I am particularly interested in exploring what that might do for us if we do go down to 10% for this, for the next budget cycle, and what impact that would have on both the capital side and on the municipal budget side. Because for me, if that's the difference between us meeting all of our other priorities and not, then that seems worth it to me. But if it's not going to have that impact, then I think that that would also be helpful to know.
Thank you. Sean?
On the setting a number for roads, I would not caution, but we're working on a plan that would be presented to the council at some point in the next couple months. And you may want to either tie this to that plan or the discussion that happens following that plan, before sending a number here, because it might, be below or above whatever would come out of that plan. And then on the 10.5% for capital. So yeah, so ultimately it just dictates how much we can do, right? So if you lower it, it may impact the timing of, when we could take on the fire station project, right? I think we're focused on the DPW, sort of the one that's queuing up next, but we also have the fire station on the horizon as well. So, could it go lower than 10.5? Yes, but it would be a trade-off. It would be either less for cash capital, or it would, reduce the ability for us to complete that project. So, I've been away for a little bit. I haven't dug into the latest plans for the project. But if we use the money and capital stabilization towards the DPW project, again, that's a big change from what we were looking at a few years ago. So I just got to wrap my head around how we adjust for that. But I like, I'm always in favor of flexibility. So, I think the goal should stay 10.5%. But if this is a year where the debt hasn't started, for the DPW, for example, it's unlikely the debt will be there in FY27, and our cash capital requests, which we haven't received all of them yet, are not overwhelming, then it's possible we could go lower than 10.5% for FY27. But then that's something that would have to be when we get to a future year. If the council wanted to go back to that, then that's a step up in future years. So anytime you step down, to get back there is going to be more painful. We're kind of at that level now. So just keep that in mind. If we step down and we do have to go back, when we go back, it's going to be a big, a big decision.
Thanks. Andy?
Yeah, I'm struggling with the 10.5% question too. The 10% is what is in the financial policies of the town. And but I think that there are solid arguments that have already been made about 10.5%. Maybe we should consider a little bit more flexibility in language, saying allocate a minimum of 10% and, if possible, 10.5%, and then leave it to the manager to make the decision as to which amount when more information is available.
Kathy?
I like Andy's suggestion a lot. Mandy, you asked for a number, and the number I was going to put in was 10. The 10.5 was predicated on, we thought we'd be rolling out all of the buildings at the same time. We don't, for a variety of reasons, the DPW and fire have been delayed. We don't quite have a committee yet. That means we don't have a schematic design for DPW, and we've said that's our first priority. So to leave it this way, we can remove the other piece. I think we're going to need that amount of money to do the things we just said we want to do with the budget for this year. So that's what I'm looking at. And Sean, you can do the math better than I can. We're talking about another 300,000-ish that would be available for I think the difference between 10 and 10.5 would be available from the operating budget. So we can get that number so we can explain to people what this does. If people are comfortable with it, I'm comfortable with it. And what I'd like to advocate is I don't think it's good to keep building up a capital stabilization fund and never use it when we said we have these capital needs. So I don't care what the number is, but I think we should begin to draw on some of that money. Otherwise, everyone is looking at it saying, your savings account for buildings is growing while the operating budget for all those buildings is shrinking. That's just not a good dynamic to be in. We need to start drawing down on that. So I'm comfortable in leaving this, that we haven't made a decision on how to draw it down yet, but to start to bring it in. And Sean, you remember we did this, we pulled money in. We actually pulled it in from stabilization during COVID when we couldn't supplement enough. We just had a line in the capital budget where we were doing it out of the current revenues and we were bringing in some money. So that's the way the line would look when JCPC sees it in February.
Yeah, I personally like the minimum of 10% because the way it was originally worded, it could go down to nothing.
Yeah.
And I think we need to maintain at least 10%. But if we can get a little bit of extra money for operations, I think, certainly this year. But I mean, it does, to Sean's point, next year it'll be more painful to go back to 10.5% if we want to.
So are people comfortable with, Bob, you can see the hands. Mandy just did a quick edit of all 3 lines, included, we didn't say a specific amount for roads, but asked that we have a target amount for roads. Are people comfortable with the rewording of those 5 bullets, I guess?
Yes.
Yeah, it's good for me.
So the next bullets, and what you could leave this with, just if we can get through the executive summary, I'll go back and make the changes as needed in the explanation of these and send people a draft so you can comment on it. So what Mandy was saying is we can get through the executive summary, the rest of the document then starts to talk about what we talked about here. So with these, are there any questions, changes? And I think one is potentially very controversial. The middle school roof budget, as big as, and here's one of the typos, Andy, that you said for the middle school roof. The middle school roof MSBA funding excluded the auditorium, despite the fact that there is a report documenting the leaks. And if you walk in the auditorium, your eyes will document the leaks because you can look at the ceiling and the buckets. And they are working, I double checked last night with Shannon, they're working at getting an estimate of what that augmented amount would mean beyond the budget they already have for the rest of the roof. from the estimator. So I don't know the number that is, but it was in the million point two range when I asked in September. So I put that in as a place. So this is when certified free cash comes in, what are our recommendations on potentially where to use it? So the two were roads and sidewalks and the middle school auditorium, and then the rest to revenues to the stabilization fund. So if there were any left after that. So those are brand new compared to last year.
Mandy, just take out the O before the middle school auditorium.
See, there's a typo. Yeah.
Sean?
Yeah, so I think that's the one that I'm concerned with. I think if the region wants to propose that, there's a capital plan process for them to propose that all four towns would contribute to. I don't know why Amherst would fund all of it or do sort of a process outside of that. Again, they're doing a capital planning process right now. That'll be part of their budget. They could, if it's up to, I think we're not their facility staff. We don't know what evaluation they've done in terms of repairing, or maybe you do. I don't know what evaluation they've done in terms of repairing that roof. I also don't know if that roof is 1 year away from being MSBA eligible, or 2 years away from being MSBA eligible, or 10 years away from being MSBA eligible. I mean, if it's 10 years, then yeah, something needs to be done. But I would still feel like it should go through the established capital process for the roof, which would call on all four towns to help fund it, not just appropriation from Amherst.
Can I speak to that? If others are not, Sean, the reason I put it in here is construction is due to start in June. So unless it's similar to what you did 3 years ago on track and field, where Amherst allocated some of it to the track and field project. So the timeline is such that if the money isn't there, the rest of the roof gets built and done except for the auditorium roof. And in terms of at this point, it's probably within 1 year of being old enough. It's a pretty rigid rule that says it's leaking, but it's only it was 23 years old when they applied. Now it's 24 years old. So I think it's within 1 year if we got back into accelerated repair, but it would mean setting up to do all the roof except the auditorium roof, and then later come back and do the auditorium roof, where there's actually been, there is a full-blown assessment of it I could share with you, that it's not just leaking, but it's leaking badly, and tiles have fallen down on people's heads. So I don't understand MSBA putting an arbitrary limit on part of a roof, but they did. And so that's all I wanted to say about this. Yeah.
Kathy, can I respond to that real quick?
Go ahead, Sean.
So maybe more flexibility in this one. I've had a conversation with Shannon about this a while ago, so there could be more information on it. At that time, it wasn't clear whether we would even be able to include this within that project. Maybe there's been additional information since then that they could, but it wasn't clear that we would be able to adjust the scope of the contract to include this. But if there is, I still don't know I don't know for sure that the capital process at the region would prohibit them from doing a vote and getting that out at Springtown meeting and getting the funding approvals at that time. It might, you're right, maybe it would need to be done, but maybe just consider additional flexibility working with the regional schools on this.
Mandy has her hand up. Yeah.
Can I?
Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't like this bullet point, particularly the way it's worded. The next one below is allocate the remaining to capital stabilization funds. I understand the need and desire to potentially do the whole roof at the same time at the middle school, but it is a region. And I feel like a broken record with the region. It is 4 towns' responsibility, not 1 town. And there is a process, as Sean just said. If it is found that they want to do it at the same time and they need to borrow money to do it, they pass a borrowing authorization, and each town has 60 days to say no to that borrowing authorization. And we would have 60 days to receive a funding plan from Paul in a sense, either for borrowing or, for cash, right? To potentially pull it out of, and maybe Paul would recommend just borrowing and rolling it into the borrowing plan for our yearly capital, or maybe Paul would recommend pulling out of capital stabilization with a financial order for capital stabilization that the money's going in. We can access capital stabilization at any time that Paul submits a financial order. So I don't like this bullet point the way it is worded at all, because it ignores the other three towns, and it is their responsibility to maintain that building too, not just Amherst's. And we're still working on figuring out who can pay cash and who can't, and should we be gifting $1 million for something that might not be done when all four towns really should be contributing to it. And maybe it goes into borrowing, which might be a better allocation and use of our resources than a cash. I don't know whether it is, but we could have that conversation. I know Pelham's trying to prepay their current roof obligation, right? Maybe, but we can do that at any time through the capital stabilization fund if the money is reverted to the capital stabilization fund. So I would delete this bullet point completely.
Any other comments?
Don?
Yeah.
Andy?
And I was just going to quickly respond. I'm not, this is just really a point of technicality. Technically, the region could vote a debt authorization at any point. We always try to do it within 60 days of town meeting so that town meeting had the chance to act on it. I will say more often than not, and this is going back when I was in the region, I don't know if it's the case anymore, more often than not, it wasn't even brought up at town meeting, so it just passed the 60 days. They didn't bring it up for a vote. So if it's truly an emergency, they could vote a debt authorization, in December, and then each town could decide whether or not they wanted to call call a special town meeting to act on it if it's an emergency situation. Not saying I recommend that, but I think, again, if it was a true emergency, that's the kind of thing that might happen.
Andy?
Yeah, of course, Sean, we just did do that exactly for the whole roof of the middle school. It was out of cycle for the town meetings. And I think that some flexibility in the language would be helpful too. And it could be just something like, be prepared to allocate funds as necessary if the region asks for capital for the middle school auditorium roof. And then it sort of puts the thought there, but doesn't make a specific allocation.
I think that wording, capital improvement so once Manny finished writing for the auditorium roof, that would allow the points that have been made is that may not need $1 million because if it's financed with debt, it's something lower than that for each year. So I would be, since I added the other bill, I am comfortable with this because we've got it in the collection of we can transfer some money in from the capital reserve as needed. So with that change, I'd be comfortable with deleting the allocate up to $1 million.
I agree.
Is it okay that I put it into the capital budget section? I think it makes more sense there.
Yeah, I think, well, unless we think everyone moves so fast that we're doing certified free cash in December where we've got a proposal in front of us. So I think that's right, Mandy, that we can do it out of cycle just the way we did before. Is that ever okay? But because it is a capital expenditure. So I think it's 11:45. And I'm just those of you who can see more than I can see because of my limited Zoom. I don't know whether we have any public here for public comments.
We still have no attendees.
Okay, so we can continue doing what we're doing. So most of the rest is going to go through explanation. Now, the one thing that we have up in the beginning, and then we reiterate it, that we're advising against an override because we're already high taxes. And we've got the vague, because Paul said it's 15, it's likely to be in the 15 to 20% range. We don't know what health insurance is, so it was just left vague unless we get a new number. And then this one, and then the other is a saying that we're advising against an override, but reminding everyone it's going to be a very difficult year. And this was this language of update us where all of this is by March 1st. So it's before the final submission. We're really trying to avoid what happened last year where the council was revising guidelines without a lot of information, but we need to get as much information as we can. So that's also new, that yellow.
I agree.
Kathy, I have
Yeah.
a comment on this
Yep.
yellow section. Thank you for putting it in. I know I'm the one that sort of suggested this. I wonder if March 1 might be too late because that's when the budget hearings for schools are already. So maybe we're looking at like February 15th or something so that maybe we could discuss it at our second February meeting of the council. I'd like to hear Sean and Paul's thoughts on that. But the other thing, my thinking on this request is, and it's not necessarily the greatest of wording, and it's missing something that I wanted to make sure was in here, is I think we need a really good estimate of what the impacts of what our budget guidelines are. So if it's 3.5%, what are we losing? Potentially position wise or department wise or that for each of the 4 functional areas. But then I think we also need, what does it cost to put them back in? What does it really cost to put those and fund those 3 library positions that have essentially been frozen for 6 years at this point? What would it cost to actually unfreeze every position we froze last year in the municipal, as well as whatever might have the proposal is to remove or to add positions? And for the schools, what would it cost? Right? Because I think that's the number we also need to see, is not just what our budget can support now, but what does it cost to support what we're losing or what we're trying to add in? Because we get a lot of requests for a lot of different additions to our budgeting, but we never see how much that would cost. And to me, we need to know those numbers, and the public needs to know those numbers, because that goes into, do we ask for a 2.5% Prop 2.5 override? What number would we be asking for? On a property tax revenue of about 70 million, I think, is our property tax revenue. What are we missing? Is it 10% of our revenue that to fund everything people are asking for? Is it 20%? Like what are the numbers? We need to know the severity of the issue and how much. So I want to put in a sentence that says, and an estimate of how much additional operating support would be necessary for each department to receive. That's the 4 major functional areas sort of things in order to fund the positions and requests. Like, what would we need too? Not just what are we losing, but what would we need? So I would like to add that sentence back in, or put it in here so that we can, and then potentially change the date so that we can actually have that conversation early in this process.
I agree. That's one piece of the puzzle that's missing. We don't know, what is the shortfall, so to speak? Is it 2 million? Is it 20 million? Is it 5 million? We don't know.
The reason I have my hand up is that's a tough question, Bob, and but there are so many other things that have been asked for or we recognize that we need. Getting back, for example, to the roads and what is needed to um, fund on an annual basis road construction at an adequate amount to actually get somewhere, which is something that Sean and Paul are working on now. Uh, so it's a difficult question, and then you have to add into it. We get lots of requests at various times to do all sorts of additional things. We just got a fairly comprehensive um, request or whatever you want to call it from CSSJC about the issues that they've raised. So I think it's important that we get something in there, but not limit it to just the positions. And it's going to take some creative writing to do that.
No, I agree, Andy. I think it's also important for the public to know, here's, I've said this before. We have requests that are this big, and we have funding that's this big. But no, I don't know how big this, how wide my hands need to go.
So, so I think what this paragraph is asking for, so Sean and Paul need to react to this. It's this a look at what it's going to take to live within, let's just assume it's 3.5% right now. That's what's on the table. What's it going to take on how would you get there? And then the flip side is what Maddie has just said. If the library thinks there is X number more positions, or the town thinks, what would that total cost be? This is not dissimilar from the wish list on vehicles that we see on the capital budget. Like, these are all the vehicles we would want. And then you get down to, can you live with this many? And it turns out, oh, we can actually live with quite a few. It's not the same. But I think this is that we're up against hard choices. So can this happen with some kind of a pro forma? This is where we're at. How would we achieve it? And if we were to have all of those in the budget that are being cut, what would that cost be to us? How much more would it be? That kind of discussion. Sean and Paul, is that possible to do before we ask you to figure out a way to do it?
Yeah, is it okay, Paul, if I go? Is Paul here? I think he chopped off, actually. So yeah, I see it as two parts. I think one part is easier than the other part. So the first part, just what would level services look like, and particularly at the schools and at the library and at the town. I think when we build the budgets, we can keep track of what are those positions that maybe are either being eliminated or not filled, the frozen positions. That I view that as part one, and that is not too bad for us to do. I think part two is more challenging, and we can try to do something. I just don't know if it'll be perfect. And that's new things, new investments in roads, new capital projects, new just things that we don't currently have numbers for, so it requires more estimating and more assumptions around how we would pay for them. I think that's where there's more creativity, I guess I would say, in that part of the analysis. So we can try to do something there. But, for example, like if we've heard a need for more new senior center or an improved senior center, we would have to come up with an estimate of what that costs, and then how, we're not going to pay for it in cash in 1 year. So then you're estimating debt. So it gets a little more complicated, I guess, than just knowing knowing what the thing is and what the upfront cost is.
I think the suggestion is just focus on people right now. Just, don't
Yeah,
go.
if it's level services and it's people, that's simple. And then, you can let us know if there's new things you want us to include in it.
Except for fire EMS staffing above the frozen position, which we already talked about earlier.
Yep.
Yeah,
So
so that we can quantify that based on our existing staff, but I guess the question would be how many staff, and would it all be in 1 year? Would it be in, phased in over a certain number of years? Again, some of that will be part of the analysis and the plan for how to improve the fire department staffing.
So Mandy is amending the wording as we talk, but I think
trying to figure out how we bring the budget guidelines into it.
so. I think this wording, at least I'm thinking that it's fairly clear, and if we get to a stopping point, I don't know what comes next, Mandy, but it's now we're approaching 10 minutes of 12. So some of it is just decrease, and then later explaining what we've done. So what I'm going to recommend, Mandy, scroll down a little bit, because I think some of it is just wording on a conservative revenue increases. So some of it is explaining what we set up in the executive summary. So what I would suggest is that Mandy, close this down, save these changes as of today's date, 11/20. I send it back out to everyone for comments on the remaining thing where we've accepted some edits. And then we see whether we're at a point that we think we have a preliminary draft. So
Can
some
I
of
ask
this
a question?
Yeah.
Can I attempt to, accept all these changes that we won't have gone over with an attempt to match and change some of this to match the executive summary section? Because now, given our changes to executive summary, some of this doesn't match that before I send it to you, Kathy, so that it's a little less work for you.
That's fine with me if everyone else is, and then Mandy will get that to me, and I will get you, and then I will just double check it against my notes and send it back out for comments from everybody. Does that work? So she's going to go back through the places that these yellow highlights were matched up to the executive summary, and then leave it in track changes so people can see that in this body of the report, not in
that body of the report. Yeah, but can I accept some of the other stuff that is in track changes that doesn't get changed? If we're looking at here, like something like that, or I don't even know what part of this is, but something like this, the bidders one, or the changes in numbers so that it's just an easier document to read.
Yeah, that's fine.
So that's okay with anyone. If there's no one saying no to that, that's the procedure. So Mandy's going to get this back to me by tomorrow, and then I'll get it to you by the end of the day tomorrow, and everyone will have a week to get any, and the comments can be edits that are purely typos and whatever, and I'll incorporate all of them. If there are any major concerns, I'll figure out whether we think we're ready to go to the council or not. This revised document will be put in our packet. And if we're ready to go, we can do annotated. We can do comments that there wasn't full agreement on this, or there were some alternatives. I can put them in comment bubbles, because this will just be sent as a draft. Is everyone okay with that proposal?
I have hands up by Andy and Mandy.
Okay, great.
Andy, go ahead.
I had some additional thoughts of changes later in the document, and I don't want to go into them instantly, but is there a way that I should be sharing them with the chair or somebody else so that we can keep moving without extending this meeting? How do you want to handle that?
Well, depending on what the rules from up high are, I would be fine with you saying, here are some additional thoughts on where they would go. Or if you can rattle them off in a couple minutes, Andy, just in terms of topics. So if you want to share them, then we can figure out where they would go as potential changes in this document. And and I'm just trying to end it at noon, not keep people longer than 12.
We'll quickly go to page, I think it's 4, that starts with that the projection that in the current version or the version that I have. And I'll just throw out some, see if I can see them on the screen.
You said page 4, Mandy. I don't know whether.
Given we've accepted changes, I just need a section, Andy. It would be easier if you give me a section.
It's in section 3.
Okay.
Um, see where we can get to where you have the words, she has the words add wording for elementary here, question mark. That gives you a sense of what page to look for. Okay. In the very prior word that'll be on the prior page, take out the word region. And another minor one is where it says the projections show a deficit. You will just needs to be separated into 2 words, but that was the major point that I wanted to get at was when we're at the point of, we also recommend budgeting other post-employment benefits, OPEB, $600,000 rather than increasing it as proposed at the financial indicators meeting, and continuing this budget amount in future years. And Sean might have some thoughts about this. Instead of saying amount in future years, I said until a pension fund is fully funded, because the intention of the policy all along was that we would get the pension fund fully funded, and then the money that we have allocated to the pension fund would be used to address the OPEB.
I think that's fine. And I was going to add a footnote on that too. That works well.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Andy.
Mandy,
okay. And if you have any others, Andy, that are particularly that are just wording where the wording is odd, just send them to me and I'll incorporate them.
So Mandy had her hands up.
Yeah. I in a different section, regarding there's always a section on like, I'm trying to find it in mine and I don't want to scroll on yours, about a sort of shared services and all, and the reduction, this section here, reduction expense strategies. I wonder, I would like to see us potentially open that up to not just a focus on, I've always read this as focusing on municipal budgets, but a focus on all 4 functional areas of reduction expense strategies. For example, encouraging, say, the library to work with the municipal recreation department and senior services center to ensure coordination on programming that might reduce expenses overall. Regionalization, but within obviously our government, but also things like apologize for the cuckoo clock if you heard it. The elementary school committee just posted, or will be posting, agreed to a meeting on December 9th, I think it is, to discuss potential alternatives to moving the 6th grade to the middle school building as a potential way to save money. And should we mention something like that in these guidelines about encouraging other departments, not just our municipal department, to seek reduction expense strategies, in particular something for like the school that would serve the students as well, or but while serving the students as well or better than they would get on, say, a plan to move the 6th grade into a 6th grade academy only at the middle school, if they can keep them somewhere for less money that would produce the same educational quality or better, should we put that in this budget? A guidelines document. And so essentially expand this paragraph to be not just municipal focused, but for functional areas focused too.
So here's my suggestion, since we have now hit 12 o'clock. We'll draft language there, because one of the other thoughts on that is if we get more technologically sophisticated with our heating and air conditioning systems, do we need a higher level facilities person that works with any building? It doesn't matter whether it's a school building or a town building. So we're not trying to get high skilled staff in every budget. So we'll put, if we can add a sentence here that talks about coordination between things, and it'll be yellow shaded so people will see it. Does that work?
Yep.
And so people can expect to see this here as an advising. And I think at one point our facilities person was the school's facility person, but I'm not saying just in general, but there's some places where we should share a scarce resource. And with that, I'm going to.
Kathy, Alicia has her.
Alicia?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to mention I agree with what you said, Kathy, but I particularly agree with what Mandy Jo said. I think that's going to be extremely important to start now. And I think it should be a practice that we continue, especially while we're going to see these sort of continuous budget crunches into the future. So I just wanted to agree with that.
Okay, so pay attention to whatever page this is going to end up on. In 5-ish, there's going to be new wording on whether we capture that concept. Yeah. And so with that, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn the meeting at whatever time it is. And then Kathy will try to get her laptop fixed so it can work next time. And we don't have another meeting until December 3rd. Oh. So everyone will have to participate by sending me. So I make a motion.
Can I say one more thing before that motion goes forward?
Sure.
I think it's important that we put whatever draft comes out of this and whatever changes you feel comfortable making before it comes back to Finance Committee to the council for discussion on December 1st. Our next finance meeting is December 3rd. Then we actually don't have one until the council is done meeting. So I think the council does need to see our vision and where this draft is so that we can basically finalize for the council on our meeting on December 2nd or 3rd or whenever it is.
That was my intent, Mandy, if I didn't make that clear. So that this draft everyone's seeing is the draft that's going to the council. So people need to respond to it in time to get it on the council. And I realize when I say next week, you have all next week, Thanksgiving is sitting in there. So you have a few days next week. So we'll try to get it to you by tomorrow afternoon or Saturday morning. Anyway, you'll have it.
And it should really be to Athena by probably Wednesday morning.
Yep.
To get posted in a council packet.
So I'll put a deadline for comments when I send it to everyone.
And it's 12:04 and I second the motion to adjourn.
Okay, so Bob, if you can go around the room. Okay. Oh, I can do it if I put it back to gallery. So Andy.
Yes.
Mandy.
Aye.
Bob.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Alicia.
Yes.
And I don't know whether Joe's still there, but Joe. And Kathy's a yes. We are adjourned at 12:05. Thank you, everyone, for moving so quickly through a complicated document.
Nice.
Thanks for.
Thank you.
Bring it.